And what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and as always, welcome back to the garage. As you can tell by the thumbnail, we got a lot going on today for my 2012 Chevy Sonic we got in the background. I've already made my way into the project a little bit. I've taken off the front bumper. I will put a link up to my previous video which shows you in detail how to take off the front bumper, just so we can save some time today. We have boxes and boxes of parts, mainly from ZZPerformance. They make a lot of great stuff for these Chevy Sonic, Chevy Cruises, and plenty more other platforms. And ZZP prides themselves for being able to buy all these parts for cheap without going broke. Go fast, not broke is what their motto is. I'm going to briefly go over what we're going to be doing today. There's going to be a lot going on. I'll probably break it up into two different videos, but we're going to be doing a swap out with the ZZPerformance intercooler. Helps these guys out stay cool. We're going to be swapping out oil cooler itself. They tend to leak oil from various different places, but it kind of goes hand in hand with the heat problem. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on in and get started with this project. We're going to be working with some electronics, taking off some stuff, and we're going to be working with the coolant. So I'm going to first disconnect the battery, the negative cable on the battery. On the passenger side, hopefully you guys can see from where you're at, but down here, down up underneath here, there's your little drain petcock. So you're gonna need to undo this little, looks like a plastic bolt, and that's how you're gonna drain your coolant out. So while that's draining, we're gonna move on to the next part. One thing I did, probably overkill, probably don't have to, I just jacked up the back because I'm trying to get as much of that old coolant out from the heater core in the back. And then I'll probably tilt it this way just a little bit just to kind of get everything out as possible. We're gonna go ahead and take off the air hose, specifically the one from the turbo. Take off your turbo inlet hose. Real simple. You just undo these two worm gears, one on top, one on bottom. That pulls off quick and easy. And then you're gonna move your way over here to this side because we're gonna have to take off this tank here. So mine's already pretty much drained out, so I won't make a mess. But use some pliers, pull that guy off, set it aside. Down here we have another worm gear that connects to this bottom side, and that's pretty much it. And then last but not least, these two bolts right here look like 10 millimeters, so we'll take those off. Now with that out the way, we're going to go ahead and remove the inlet hose to the radiator. There's your clamp down there, hopefully you can see. Actually from the front, it looks like from the front it's probably a little bit easier to get to, so try to get that inlet hose off. Next up on the passenger side, you're going to go ahead and take off your outlet hose. There's different ways you can get to it. I'm probably going to go from underneath and behind, but as you can see here, it's like a 90-degree elbow right there. There's like this little pull pin, hopefully you guys can see it right there. You're going to pull that out and it actually should detach from the radiator from there. And once you have it free, you shouldn't have too much drippage, but hopefully you guys can see there. There you go, it's off. So let's make our way up back to the top. So next up, you're going to take off this front air baffle here. It's literally only held on by clips. So there's two up top, one right there, one right there, and then there's two down here on the side, one right there, one right there. So simply take that off. Next up, you're going to need to take off the fan shroud inside your engine compartment. It's literally only held on by 3 screws. There's one over here underneath the connector, which powers your fan shroud. And then there's 2 over here. It's kind of hard to see them, but there's one right here. And then the last one, even harder to see, but it's just easier to get to from the bottom. But the last one is actually down just up underneath where your outlet hose is. They look like they're 8 millimeter. And then we'll get this guy, and then we'll move on to the next part. Once you have those 3 screws out, as you can see, the fan shroud is loose and it could technically come out right now. But before we do that, I'm actually going to move my way up to the front. I took off this upper bracket. It's held in by 2 10 millimeter bolts right there. Super simple, super easy to take that off. Then I turned my attention to the brackets holding on the condenser itself. There's 3 screws. There's one over here on the right side. There's one over here on the passenger side with a little fastening clip right there. And then the third one is down here just underneath that one. So I'm gonna undo this fastening clip. That should allow us to pull the condenser forward a little bit. You gotta support the condenser. I think I'm gonna leave it on the intercooler. I think we'll be able to do that. But you're gonna pull this forward, get you some room so that you can take out the radiator behind it. Once you have those 3 bolts undone, as you can see, your condenser can move freely. Next up, you're going to go ahead and take off your radiator support brackets up top. there's these two 13mm bolts. So simply take those off. Now with those two brackets out the way, you can see the whole radiator, condenser, fan shroud, all these guys are loose. What I actually went ahead and did was take off these two brackets. I left this one here. Those guys, I went ahead and I took them off. So those come off real easily with this drill. And then I went ahead and took off the center hood latch because this was also kind of getting in the way. And I don't want to damage it as I'm taking it out, and I definitely don't want to damage the new one as I put it in. So just kind of making some additional clearance for us. And now as you can see with that out the way, you have a whole bunch more room, and I can pretty much just go straight up with this radiator. I was trying to get out the radiator and I couldn't, so one thing I noticed and found out that the directions don't say on the service manual is on the Love engines, the intercooler itself kind of sits on the lower portion of the radiator. There's like a bracket down there. So what I had to do was take out this 8mm bolt right there in that rusty spot. Then on this side you have a clip. As you can see, same kind of clip that was holding on the condenser itself. So you take those two things out, and as you can see down here, hopefully, that's the lower part of the intercooler. And then there's like this cup shape or U-shape bracket which the intercooler is sitting on. So once I undo these, hopefully the hoses have some slack in them, so I can literally lift up on the intercooler, pull it forward out of that bracket, and then to be able to pull out the radiator. So that's what I'm trying to do. I need two hands for this, so let me go ahead and set the camera down, and then I'll take out the radiator, which is this middle one. And well, there you go, guys. It definitely took some finagling to get it out between the fan shroud and the condenser, but it is out, and here you go. Here's your stock radiator assembly. What you want to do for sure is once you get it most of the way out, you have quite a bit of slack. So this is the connector that's on the temperature sensor down here at the bottom passenger side of the radiator. Yeah, like I said, you have some slack to work with, so just make sure you disconnect that before you take it all the way out. But now that we have this guy out, there's some stuff we're going to have to transfer from this guy over to the new radiator. So without further ado, let's go ahead and pull out the huge ZZP Radiator. And voila, guys, here it is. The ZZP ZZPerformance Upgraded Radiator. And yes, it's shiny, aluminum, but the big thing, see if I can show you this. Take a look at how big that is. That's honestly, shoot, that's probably at least 2 inches.
Wow.
And look at the stock one. Substantial difference, as you can tell. This is probably maybe ½ an inch. And this one, you can literally put 4 of these in that same thickness of this guy. So that's one of the big reasons why these 1.4 liter Sonics overheat. Their radiator is extremely tiny and they run extremely hot. So this guy definitely will help circumvent that problem. Without further ado, let's continue. And what we got to do is move some stuff from the old one to the new one. Real simple. Up here at the top, you got your little isolator pads. You take those guys off, set them over onto the new one. Boom, that's the first thing. Then there's some U-shaped ones on the bottom, or some circle-shaped ones, excuse me, which I actually left in the car because they were in there nice and firm, so I didn't want to move those out. So those two bottom bushing little circle things, you remove those and you take those over here. And then you're going to set it on its front, and you got to take off the temperature sensor. So over here at the bottom left, as you can see here, that's where your little temperature sensor is going to come from. It's pretty simple to take it off. I can't do it by hand, but you pull the little clip just like the radiator hose itself. This guy slides out, and then we'll slide it right back in there, put the clip in place, and that's how you remove and install the temperature sensor. And there we go. So now we got the temperature sensor moved over, we got the little upper bushing pads moved over. Technically, this guy is ready to go back into the vehicle. We'll go ahead and take off these little covers here. Might as well do that now before we forget. Note the orientation. Obviously the hoses are going to face inside the vehicle, and then this side here is going to be the outside. So let me go ahead and grab it and move it over. So here it is. I'm going to have to do this with 2 hands and carefully, because I got to pull forward on the condenser and then keep the shroud back. And then we're aiming for getting these little bottom tabs, as you can see those. You're trying to get them down there. You can see that hole, both sides. There's a little hole, which is the little rubber insulator, just like the top side. So you're gonna have to finagle this in. If you have a person to help you, that'll make it a lot easier. Otherwise, just kind of take your time, be careful. Don't damage the fins on your condenser nor on your radiator. Okay guys, so that took a little bit of time. Definitely was not easy to fit it in there because of just how big it is and how little bit of clearance you have between the condenser and the radiator. But nonetheless, like I said, got it in there. Haven't bolted anything down quite yet, but we're good to move on to the next part. So now that I got the bottom part in, I'm going to go ahead and get the hoses connected. I'll get these brackets installed, or I should say the outer brackets, the ones that just hold on to the upper portion of the radiator, just so we can hold them in place. So now that I got the upper radiator hose and the lower radiator hose put in place, I'm going to go ahead and get these front pieces put back on, those little orange ones over there, and then of course the hood latch. Let me get those in real quick. Now that I got that in place and these brackets on, I'm gonna go ahead and start connecting some of the connectors, starting with the radiator fan circuit over here, just behind the upper radiator hose. That clicked into place nicely. Here I'm gonna push this back down to the bottom. That's your temperature sensor. So probably easier to access it from the bottom and the back, just right there. Let's go ahead and get that guy connected. Now that you got those connected, one thing you're going to have to do is actually find some screws, because the existing screws, which used to hold your condenser on right here, they'll no longer work because of the thread pattern. So hopefully you can find you some bolts in your bolt drawer. Otherwise you have to make a trip down to the hardware store. But yeah, install the 3 screws, one here, one there, and the last one over here to hold your condenser in place. Alright, so I got those 3 bolts in place, and before I do anything else, since I removed my intercooler, I'm gonna go ahead and get this guy and put this guy back in place real quick. So now that I'm done with pretty much connecting all that good stuff up front, I am going to jump back in. I disconnected a whole bunch of extra cables. You don't have to disconnect these cables, so whatever cables you did disconnect, go ahead and put them back in. But I'm just going to go ahead and connect mine real quick, and then we're going to move on to the last little bit of parts over there. With all those cables connected, we're going to go ahead and put this little brace piece back on. This guy literally just sits in place just like that on both sides. It's got a little groove right there. And then your 10mm bolts, those guys simply just screw in right here. So tighten those on. Next, you'll take your front baffle. This guy, if you remember, was literally just held in by clips. So that's literally all I'm gonna do. Set it in place, and then use these little clips to push it back in. Back up top, I'm gonna go ahead and put my surge tank or my overflow tank back in place and just screw that on with the 2 10mm bolts. And then go ahead and put your hose into the top right there. And then this hose right here, I actually got it tucked away over here, out of place, out of the way. So go ahead and fidget it back down into place. Make sure your worm gear is loose. You can go ahead and put that guy back in place, and then tighten down your worm gear. And then last but not least, you're gonna go ahead and take your intake pipe, take out your little safety thing you got right in there, put it back on, and then screw it back into place. Alright guys, and once you have the hose back connected and installed, double check that you have all your fasteners put in place, because now we're going to get ready to fill her up and start her up. I'm not going to put back on the front bumper quite yet, nor the heat shield, because I want to make sure I can see if there's any leaks, oil leaks or coolant leaks, once I get this guy filled up and we turn it on to kind of start getting everything cycled in. So we're going to go ahead and start filling this up. One thing that's unfortunate, these Chevy Sonics, is they don't have really a radiator fill. Everything that's going to fill up is going to be through this surge tank. It's a pressurized system, so yeah, it's going to be kind of slow going at first, but we'll go ahead and get it going. What I recommend you get, if you don't have one, is one of these no spill coolant fill funnel kits. They're very handy, very awesome. I use them for every single radiator fill that I do on all the vehicles. Have all kinds of parts. And the cool thing is, as you see, I took off the cap, set that aside. Now, just dig through the goodie kit, which I think we have this guy here. That's going to fit right there in place. Has a good rubber seal on the bottom. Then find a cap similar to the OEM one. Screw that bad boy up. And there you go. Now you have a OEM cap with the hole for your funnel. So let me dump out all these extra ones that I will not need. But then the whole container itself becomes a funnel. Put that guy back on, slide that into place, and boom. There you go. Dump all our coolant in there. For coolant, the Chevy Sonic takes just over 6 quarts. So I have a total of 8 quarts at the moment. Not too sure how much more this radiator is going to take. But as you saw earlier in the video, this one is honestly about 4 times the size. So we'll see how much this is actually going to take. It's going to take a while before everything gets circulated in the system. So we're just going to keep an eye on this, keep dumping till we get to that point. Alright guys, so I went ahead and put in almost the entire 8 quarts. There's probably about, I'd probably say maybe 1 quart left. So I know there's plenty more that's got to go in, but we're near the top. And I'm squeezing the hoses, and we've seen full. So what we're going to go ahead and do, we're going to go ahead and start the car, turn on the heater, and then with the heater going, hopefully it's going to start circulating into the heater core, and we'll see this guy drop. So as this drops, we'll start to dump more into there. One thing I forgot to say, the OEM calls for DexCool 50/50. So that's what I went and got. GM Vehicles DexCool, ready to use, pre-diluted 50/50. And you should be good to go. Let me go ahead and jump in the car. Actually first, put the negative cable back on the battery. Then jump in the car, start it, let it warm up, and let's see what it does. So the car is running. As you see, we got smoke coming up, but that's because of all of the oils that I put pretty much on everything. So it's going to smoke for a while, but that's okay. So we're just going to keep an eye on the coolant level, see if that drops as we let it idle, and let's just cross our fingers and hope for the best. I have my little OBD2 scan tool going. We're at about 150. Normally this guy gets us about 220, like I said. So we're going, no codes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn it off temporarily, lift it back up, fully put back on my bumper, take it for a test drive, and get it fully up to temp, and then bring it back and let's see what happens. Well, there you have it, guys. I went ahead and took it for a drive, got it up to full operating temperature, 221, and I'm just double checking it right now, checking for leaks, and it looks like we're all good to go. It was a long project. It took me a little bit longer because I was videotaping, but yeah, definitely expect to expend probably a good portion of the day if you're doing both the oil cooler and the radiator. It took a little bit of finagling for that big radiator, but as you can see it peeking through there, man, it's so much better. I'm gonna leave her outside for the night just in case there's any leaks that spring up overnight. We'll check it in the morning, but other than that, you're good to go for this project. So thank you once again, everybody, if you stayed all the way through. I do appreciate your time. I do appreciate your views. You successfully swapped out your radiator, and if you followed from the other video, you've also successfully swapped out your oil cooler in your 2012 to 2016 1.4 liter turbo Chevy Sonic. So stay tuned. We got plenty more videos to come for the Sonic, for the truck, for the Accent, for the Jag, and of course for my favorite, the GTR Gzilla. But just like that, I'm calling it for today. Super long day, long night now, and I'll check you guys out in the next video soon.